Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. Happy New Year's. If you're listening to this episode in real time, this is the first episode of 2026 and I hope everybody listening had a great welcoming of the new calendar years. I think I have mentioned in my last episode that I got sick during Christmas time. But by the time of New Year's Eve, I was feeling much better. But my New Year's was very quiet. I spent it with my mom who was visiting from Michigan. And we just stayed home and we had a nice dinner and we wrote our intentions for the New Year's and we watched some shows on Netflix and we celebrated the New Year's at midnight. There was a lot of fireworks happening outside my apartment here in Long Beach, so we were able to watch some fireworks from our front door. And that was our New Year's, which was pretty nice. I like a very chill, calm beginning of New Year's. It was raining here in LA, which was also kind of nice. So I hope you had a good New Year's or celebration or welcoming of New Year's, the horse year. If you are a brand new listener to this podcast, I want to say welcome. Thank you for tuning in. And if you are a returning listener to this podcast, I want to say thank you for coming back. This podcast, Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast, was started 2 years ago. And I've been releasing new episodes once a week for the past 2 years. The intention for this podcast is that I interview full-time yoga teachers from across the world. Many teachers who's been teaching for over a decade and many teachers who have found their way to build their career in a way that they can continue teaching yoga as their career sustainably. The reason why I wanted to start this podcast is because I am a full-time yoga teacher myself, and I always wanted to speak to other full-time yoga teachers and have in-depth conversations about how they became where they are at in their career, what inspired them to be where they are at, and also how is it possible that they're making it work as a full-time yoga teacher, because I know it's not easy, and many full-time yoga teachers that I was seeing and speaking to, I realized that a lot of them had different financial help, whether from their previous career or maybe another job they have or their partner or from their family. So that made me start to think, is it actually really possible to be fully independent full-time yoga teacher? I know it's possible because that's what I am, but I wasn't sure if there was other teachers out there who were really fully independently being a full-time yoga teacher. So that's kind of why I started the podcast. I wanted to hear about their career journey, not only their yoga journey, but their career and what are some creative ways that they make being a full-time yoga teacher a sustainable income. As I started this podcast, I interviewed many full-time yoga teachers, but also part-time teachers or teachers who used to be full-time who's now part-time, or even teachers who used to be full-time who have completely left the yoga world and pursued another career. And I find all of these stories so interesting, inspiring, fascinating, and I can always learn something from every single conversation I have, as well as I can find something to admire and be inspired by their stories. So that's what I hope you are finding from these interviews that you get to listen on my podcast. I'm not trying to promote being a full-time yoga teacher is the best way to be, or being full-time is better than being part-time, or being a yoga teacher is the best career choice for everybody. That's not what I'm trying to promote, or that's not my message with this podcast. I was just purely curious of how other full-time yoga teachers were doing it. And along the way, as I started interviewing many people, I realized that a lot of the common thread of these conversations were that many of them diversify their income stream, and maybe not always from yoga income streams. Some of them have other income stream that is maybe yoga related but not teaching yoga. Maybe they're wellness related but not particularly yoga. Or maybe they're not related to yoga at all I think that's the reality of it. But I think many teachers I interviewed do it because they love it. And many teachers really have to get creative with their income stream, because from speaking to many teachers, it's quite clear that teaching group classes alone is not enough to be a full-time yoga teacher. It's not enough income to be a sustainable full-time yoga teacher. So many teachers find a unique way to make other forms of income. And that's what's interesting to me. Starting 2026, I am making some changes on my podcast. I've been releasing once a week every Monday for the past 2 years. And for 2026, I have decided to slow down the frequency of how many episodes I am releasing. So I'm thinking of releasing maybe every other week or maybe 2 episodes a month. I want it to be more organic and natural. And when I have a great conversation to release and great topic to talk about, that's when I will release without the pressure of having to release and scrambling to try to get an episode ready for weekly release. So I hope that makes sense to you. And if you know any yoga teachers that you would want me to interview, please message me and let me know. If you are a full-time yoga teacher or yoga teacher with story to tell, story to share, let me know and we can schedule an interview. I do want to get to 100 interview of yoga teachers. Even though I have over 100 episodes, many of them are repeat guests and some of them are mini-series. So I have not interviewed 100 yoga teachers yet. I think I have about 30 yoga teachers to interview to get to my 100. So that is still my goal. So maybe I can get to that this year, 2026. And another change or another update for the podcast is that I would love to make some kind of a community space for podcast listeners to come together. So some of the idea I have is maybe offering monthly meetup Q&A sessions for podcast listeners. And this will be a free gathering. So I don't know, that's something that's been floating around in my ideas. If that is something you're interested in, let me know, because more I know, more people are interested, I will actually organize it. For New Year's Day, I was able to treat myself and go take a yoga class from one of my favorite teachers, Jivana Heyman, who I interviewed on this podcast. I went to go take her class on New Year's Day, which was really fun to be in a room full of yoga students ready to start the year with yoga. There was about 75 people in that studio room, and sweating and breathing and practice together in community was really fun for me. I also took intention setting workshop with, again, Jivana Heyman yesterday at Center for Yoga, and that was also a very lovely way to start the new year, really thinking and reflecting back on 2025 and then thinking what kind of energy, intention I want to call in for 2026. This is a workshop I take almost every year around this time. Joan offered this workshop around the New Year's every year. So it has become a nice tradition for me, and I'm very grateful that I have Joan and that yoga studio, Center for Yoga, that I feel like it's kind of my home studio, even though it's not very close to me. I have to drive quite far to get to, but that is the studio I usually travel to take in-person classes from. Very grateful for my teacher, grateful for a beautiful yoga space and yoga community that there is. For my mentorship program for the New Year's 2026, amazing group of yoga teachers have come together to be part of this mentorship group for 2026 Module 1. And I'm just so excited. I'm so grateful for all of you for trusting in me to be part of this program. And I really do give it all and try my best to be of service to everybody on the mentorship program. So I'm really excited to start the year with all of you. And this is another community of yoga teachers that I am so grateful that I am part of. And I guess I get to facilitate and I get to create this community. So super excited for 2026 mentorship ahead. I do want to mention that I do have a yoga retreat in Nicaragua coming up in end of July for 2026. It's ethical yoga retreat, meaning the part of the money you pay for this retreat will go straight to nonprofit organizations working for the local community in northern Nicaragua. We will actually volunteer for one of the organization. We will take art workshop that is led by the woman who is part of the organization as well. So there's a lot more cultural exchange aspect of this retreat. That is why it's called the Ethical Yoga Retreat. And there will be every morning vinyasa classes in the morning, and then yin and restorative gentle classes in the evening. Breakfast, lunch, and dinners included. There'll be some fun activities included like temescal, sea turtle releasing, that art workshop I talked about, volunteering at after school program with children. And there's also plenty of free time for you to do what you want to do, whether that's resting, whether that's hanging out by the pool, whether that's getting a massage. There's a lot of fun activities to do in this beautiful northern beach in Nicaragua. The whole theme of the retreat is aligned with purpose. So every day the yoga classes, every day the journal reflections, every day the philosophy discussions is going to be intentionally leading you towards finding how you can align with your purpose. Learning from yoga philosophy and Eastern philosophy, as well as meditation and breathing practices like pranayama and moving practices like yoga to really get to the core of what is your purpose and how can you live your life that is more in alignment with your purpose. So that's kind of the underlining theme of the retreat. Everything planned is very intentional, and I'm very excited to be offering this retreat again this year in Nicaragua. So if you're interested, the early bird pricing is until January 7th, which is this week, Wednesday. You can get $100 off with the code EARLYBIRD100, and I'll put all the information on the show notes. So I hope you can make it to this retreat. I am so excited to be going back and bringing another group to this beautiful, almost hidden area of Nicaragua. So if you have any questions about that, you can always message me. I'll put the link to the landing page on my show notes as well, so you can go check that out. Okay, so let's get started on today's interview that I want to share with you. I am so excited to share this interview because I got to interview one of the dream guests for this conversation. And my dream guest was Jivana. Jivana Heyman is a founder and director of Accessible Yoga, the organization that is dedicated to increasing access to the yoga teachings and also supporting yoga teachers. And he also have written 3 books all about yoga and accessible yoga, how to utilize yoga philosophy for social justice work out in the world, as well as Teacher's Guide. And I have all 3 of his books. He is currently writing another book about meditation. And the first time I ever met Jivana was when I took his accessible yoga training in Denver, Colorado, maybe 2018. So it was when I was still a new yoga teacher. And I was very fascinated by accessible yoga and how to use creativity and how to still maintain the essence of yoga and also offer yoga poses in an accessible way using props. And this training really changed my yoga teaching career's directory. I was able to offer more in my teachings to the places I was teaching yoga at, like community center. I was teaching yoga for stroke survivors, senior yoga, even my private yoga clients. Right now I teach a yoga class called Therapeutic Accessible Yoga Class at one of the yoga studio. All of these was possible because of this training that I have taken with Jivana. This training has started my teaching direction towards accessibility and how can I make different variations of the pose to make the pose work for different body types. And obviously I have continued to do continuing education beyond his training, but this training definitely had a huge influence and impact on me. And you can hear me talking about this training with Jivana. And I was very happy, grateful that he remembered me, because I'm sure he have taught so many teachers, so many students in the past, and he have made so many impact and influences to so many people, and he definitely has made a huge impact on me. So I was very happy that he remembered me, and also I was happy that he said yes to come on to my podcast. So thank you, Jivana, so much for coming on. And this was one of the conversations that I had where, after finishing interviewing Jivana, my heart, my whole being felt very full and whole and refilled, rejuvenated after this conversation with Jivana. And there aren't that many people that I feel recharged, re-energized, rejuvenated after having such a long, in-depth conversation with. I like having in-depth conversation with all the people I get to interview, but sometimes it's tiring. And I think that's just normal for me to feel tired after having 100% focus on one person, one conversation in depth for the interview. But he was one of the rare ones that I felt so re-energized afterwards. And I don't know, I hope you can get that feeling from listening to this conversation I had with Jivana, the way he shares about yoga and how he answers questions, relating it back to yoga philosophy, and how he shared the concept of yoga philosophy. Everything about it is very nurturing and caring, and there's so much reverence and love and respect, gratitude for yoga, his teachers, the teachings, the philosophy. I think that is so special. He is the person that what you see online of how he is how he really is in his real life. He is being 100% truly himself. And what he shares is, really truly coming through him. He's not talking from a script. He's not trying to be somebody else that he's not. He's just being himself. And he have studied yoga for so many years that his teachings come through him with so much love and care and respect. I had such a great conversation with him. I felt amazing afterwards for the rest of that day, and that is something very special, I think. So Jivana, you are amazing. You're such a great teacher, and you have this beautiful presence about you that is so special. And any student of yours who get to learn from you are so lucky to have you as a teacher, and I feel so lucky to have you as my teacher. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation I had with Jivana. I do want to say there's certain sections when I'm speaking, the mic kind of breaks up and it's not very clear. It's not the whole time I'm speaking, but there are certain sections that my mic is breaking up, and I want to apologize ahead of time for that. I hope I can fix that in the future, but I just want to give you a heads up that there's certain section that it's kind of choppy. So I really apologize for that. But the part that he's speaking is very clear and you can understand everything. And that's the most important part of that interview. So I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Jivana, and I will speak to you on the other side. Welcome, Jivana, to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm so excited that I get to have you on the podcast and chat with you and also share this conversation with everybody listening. I do want to show you that I have all of your books.
Oh my God.
And I know you're writing your fourth one, right? I think the pranayama book.
Actually meditation. But first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Rika, for having me. And I really appreciate your invitation and the fact that you have my books. And I know you're even doing what was it, a book group?
Yes, book club.
A book club, yeah. I just really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. We're actually doing the book club on the Yoga Revolution right now, and this is our final month. So we have one more meeting at the end of this month, and we're like really close to finishing the book right now. So it's been really fantastic book club. So I'm definitely gonna ask you some questions about this
Okay,
book
good.
and maybe even other books too. But I do want to say before we even like, I guess, officially start that I took your accessible training in Denver, Colorado. I think it was 2018, maybe. That's when I first met you and was introduced to your work. And ever since then, I've been like super inspired and following you,
Yeah.
listening to your podcast, reading your books. And I started teaching accessible yoga training in my little community, yoga community here. And I remember reaching out to you on Facebook saying, like, can I teach it? Like, is it like, am I even qualified to teach it? And I think you were like, yes, go ahead and teach it. Like, we need more people teaching this in teacher training. So I remember getting your blessing. And I was like, okay, I felt
Yeah,
really good.
great work. You're doing great work. I even had
Yeah.
one of your students, I think, in a course recently, so I appreciate that, that
Yeah.
you're spreading the word and also spreading yoga. I mean, that's what it's all about in the end. I mean, that's the theme for me. The
Mhm.
focus and the goal for me is to share the message that everyone can do yoga, and you're definitely doing that. So thank you. Thanks for
Thank you so much. Yes, I think two of my students in my mentorship is currently, or maybe you finished already, but your 8 weeks, 8 limb online course that you recently did or still are in part of.
Yeah, we just finished. It was so great.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really fun.
So amazing. Okay, so let's get started. I'm sure a lot of people know you, but for some people who's listening who may not be familiar with you, let the listeners know where are you logging in from today to join this conversation, and also where are you originally from?
Mm. Yeah, so let's see. I can say, I'll just say I'm Jivana and my pronouns are he and him. And I'm joining you from Santa Barbara, California, which is Chumash land, which is in California, obviously. But I'm originally from the East Coast in the U.S. I grew up in New York and Connecticut mostly, and went to college in Ohio, but then moved to California right after college. So I've been living here for my whole adult life in
Mhm.
California, first in the Bay Area and now here. But I would say, yeah, mostly the East Coast and now I think 30 years in California. Maybe I'm a Californian. I don't know.
30 years in California. I know you are celebrating your 30th years of teaching yoga. So
Yeah.
does that mean you started teaching in California?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So I guess I've been in California 35 years because I was
Mm.
teaching. I learned yoga from my grandmother, actually. She taught me when I was a child. And then
Mhm.
um, I was an AIDS activist when I was in my 20s because it was right during, I'm older. I'm 58. And I came out of the closet during the AIDS epidemic. And so I was really surrounded by a lot of people who were sick and dying. And I was practicing yoga for myself at that time, just as
Mhm.
self-care, and then I decided to, teach yoga so that I could share it with people with HIV and AIDS, and so I started teaching in 1995.
Mm.
That's 30 years ago, believe it or not. Yeah, so
Mhm.
this is my 30th year of teaching.
Wow.
It's really been a great gift. I just wanna say how grateful I am for that, the
Mhm.
honor the honor of being able to teach yoga for so long.
Yeah. And I would love to get into kind of your teaching journey because you've been at it for so long. So back in 1995, did you have to take a 200-hour teacher training back then, or was that before the 200-hour guidelines became a thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I actually had a mentor. I was
Mhm.
Yeah, I met a teacher named Kazuko Onodera. She was Japanese American and she believed in mentorship in a very traditional kind of Japanese way. And so she kind
Mhm.
of brought me in and I studied with her personally for about 5 years. That was my main training. I mean, honestly, she was incredible and taught me, like, I would just go and like cook with her and garden and,
Mhm.
do yoga, and then she would teach me about it. But then I got impatient because I was young and I wanted to start teaching and she said, "No, no, you're not ready." And I said, "But they're offering a 200 hour." They had been doing them already at Integral Yoga in San Francisco. And so I just went and took that 200 hour, even though I'd already
Uh-huh.
been studying with her for about 4 years, 5 years. So um, she wanted me to take it very slowly, and she was probably right.
Mhm.
But I wanted to jump in, and so I started
Mhm.
after doing that 200 hour. 200 hours were just starting to get popular around then.
Mhm.
So that was the shift um,
Mhm.
around that time.
What's the were you already familiar with integral yoga before you went in to take that 200-hour teacher training? And also for listeners who may not be familiar or don't know what integral yoga is, can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit about like what kind of yoga asana or philosophy
Yeah.
meditation practice that was part of integral yoga?
Sure. Well, so my grandmother had studied yoga with two main teachers. One was Swami Satchidananda, who was the founder of integral yoga, and the other was J. Krishnamurti, who's also an incredible person in the yoga lineage. He, in
Mhm.
particular, didn't see himself as a guru and really taught that we don't need that.
Mhm.
Both of them were down here in Southern California, where my grandmother lived in LA, and so she had studied with them both in person for many years. So integral yoga was a school that Swami Satchidananda had created, and it was very popular in California. So when I met Kazuko, that teacher I mentioned in
Mhm.
the area, she also was a student of his.
Wow.
I mean, it seemed like a coincidence at the time that I found a teacher who was in the same lineage as my grandmother, but I also realized that was kind of the main teaching that was happening in California. They're both here.
Mhm.
Um, Anyway, so I was familiar with that lineage already,
Mhm.
and it's a very traditional hatha yoga lineage. The idea of integral yoga is how you integrate the different paths of yoga, including not just physical practice, but also a lot of devotional practices, study, and service were a big part of the tradition. The challenge, though, is I found out later, eventually, that, he was, having sexual relationships with many of his students, and so even though I got involved with the organization, I worked for them for about 20 years, actually. I just had to leave the organization when it hit me that this actually had happened, right? And they weren't addressing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you talk about that very openly in your books, and I really um, admire how openly you talk about it.
Yeah, it is such a big problem, I think, in contemporary practice. The fact that so many of our gurus were abusive, and yet we learned so much from them at the same time. And I think there's a few things. One is I do like to mention my teachers because I think it's important that I didn't create this. I didn't make this up. I'm just part of a lineage. Even though the lineage has problems, it goes back, for thousands of years. And so in fact, that's what kind of got me through it, was recognizing that even my teacher, even Swami Satchidananda, even though he was, not ethical and didn't practice yoga actually in the way that he was living his life, he was just passing on teachings that existed before him. And so I focus on the teachings and say that's the key, is that, and so I go back to the source text as much as I can.
Mhm.
Instead of studying with a lot of teachers these days, I just tend to read. I like to study, the sutras and the Gita, the Upanishads, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. These are the four main texts for me. And there are many others, but you know, I find these four really give me a good sense of what yoga is. And I realized that the teachers, these gurus who were abusive, they were just tapping into the power of those teachings that are available for all of us. And so, I mean, I want to acknowledge them. And yet every time I say the name of my teacher, I'm going to say that he was abusive. I mean, I can't say one without the other. And I think we need to be having those conversations more openly in yoga, because I think the real question for me is why? Why does it keep happening, especially in yoga, right? There's something, I mean, it happens in a lot of spiritual traditions that there's abuse, but why especially in yoga?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an important discussion, an open discussion to be had. Why do you think
Uh,
happens a lot in the yoga world?
I think there's a few reasons. One is that they're very powerful teachings. And I think when there's power, people abuse that. So I think it speaks to the nature of yoga as being just this source of incredible self-awareness and growth and transformation, that is incredible. And that people who are, maybe have bad intentions take advantage of that. So I think it's important for us to first recognize that what yoga has, the potential yoga has, and like how we can make that a positive thing for people. And then I think also it has to do with capitalism a little bit, and the way that we tend to like idolize people.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like the individuality that we see in the West. as if an individual person, just like celebrity culture, like we see
Mhm.
in the US, like these people are superhuman or perfect in some way. Like I think that somehow some of the gurus have used that in a sense.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's one of the goals of accessible yoga. And for me, one of my goals is to not to not do that, and to also find a way to democratize the teaching, because I think it's so complex and deep within the yoga culture that the guru, and I think the concept is fine, this idea of the teacher within us, right?
Mhm.
Something called the essence of the guru, right? Guru Tattva. It's like this, the essence of the guru that we have within us. And I think that's what we need to find and focus on, is that
Mhm.
wisdom that lies within our own hearts rather than try and seek it outward.
Yeah. I love that, and I know you have mentioned that in the book Yoga Revolution. I remember highlighting that,
Um,
looking we tend to seek for what's outside of us, we want a teacher to tell us what to do or what kind of decisions to make, but actually looking inward and finding the guru within, like you said, I think is such a beautiful way to say it. Is there, is there a sutra of Patanjali in chapter 3 that talks about possible, like, pitfall of having these powerful knowledge and tools for teachers? Is that part of the sutras in chapters 3?
well, I mean, chapter 3 is definitely where he talks about the powers. Um, he doesn't talk about pitfalls there so much that I can think of, but he does say, and I'm trying to think of where, he does say that we shouldn't be attached to the results of our practice. So even though these powers come, we have to practice non-attachment. And that's one of the themes of the sutras. And that I think is challenging when you have powers. It's actually talked about in the Gita even a little bit more. Gita Krishna talks about that, about how the dangers of the powers that come.
Mm.
It seems like he's clear in that regard. I think Patanjali is encouraging us to have those experiences, actually. I really do. I think he's encouraging these spiritual experiences. He talks about in chapter 3. I don't know if you've read chapter 3, but it's kind of mind-blowing. It talks about levitation and reading people's minds and knowing all the stars in the universe and knowing your own karma. I mean, there's just so many powers that come through these practices. I think it speaks to what I was saying earlier, like the powers that exist within yoga. It's like tremendous source of power. One of the things I always say uh, th- in terms of application of that idea and like how do we deal with that now in our lives is to make sure that when we practice and even when we teach, that we offer some dedication, that we make sure that we're practicing with a specific goal of service in mind. And I think that's often lost in contemporary culture, the service orientation. And that can be as little as at the end of class, maybe send some of that, whatever you found, some of the peace that you found or the energy you found, send it out into the world, or think of someone who's on your mind, send them some love or peace or just thoughts. That focusing of the energy of yoga in service of others is really important, because I think otherwise it builds what's already in your mind, and it just supports what's already in your mind. And if your mind is struggling, like most of us, like you still have an ego, it'll support your ego. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I talk about that in the book too. I don't know if you remember that part, but just that I think we have to really think about yoga as this like source of power, and how are you going to use it? Can you use it for good in service of the world rather
Yeah.
than build your own ego?
Yes, and that's kinda what I feel like the underlining theme of the whole book of Yoga Revolution. It has been so, helpful even before getting this book, really, because I try to listen to a lot of your podcasts when not only your podcast, but even when you're being interviewed in someone else's podcast. And, you also have a lot of free webinars and classes that you offer, but you really helped me bridge the gap of practicing yoga, but also how can we utilize that to show up for the world or show up for, the cause that I believe in. So not making that a two separate practice, but how can that be like feed into each other? I
Yeah.
think that's why I love this book so much
Oh,
because you
great.
talk about how
Uh-huh. Thanks. Yeah, and I think the theme in that book, I think that is it is about energy and power, but also about how it depends on where you're at in your life, and that it's okay if that supports you. You know, like I that's the balance I tried to find in the book that I don't know if it's clear, but that you know, many of us need energy. We need power because if we have marginalized identities, if we're struggling, if we're disabled or have trauma, whatever the reason is that we're struggling, we can use yoga to support that. Like that's awesome to support ourselves, to give us back what has been taken away. But at some point, then what's next? Like, what do you do when you start to feel better? What do you do when you have extra energy? Where does that go? And I think it's important that we focus that energy in a useful way. Because if not, it's just going to, like I said, support the ego and cause more suffering for ourselves. Like that's the part that's hard to explain. Yoga is one of the definitions of yoga, I think, that we find in the Gita, and it's even mentioned in the sutras, is that yoga is a way out of suffering. And I think that's really what I'm trying to get at, to be honest, is like, it's not just, it's a way out of suffering for us. So being of service to others, focusing your energy on them isn't just to be a good person. It's not just like morally and ethically good, but it's also a way out of suffering for us. Because if we build our own egos up, we just get more stuck, right? We get more entrenched in our own problems and our own like limited perception of the world, which is really about the idea that we don't have enough. I mean, no, the ego basically believes it doesn't have enough. And so it's always looking to gain more. Like if you look at the world and like the fact that they're billionaires, and that kind of hoarding.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hoarding, I think, is really essential actually in yoga. Hoarding power is the nature of the ego, rather than
Mhm.
to take what you need and then give back the rest.
Mhm.
So that's the balance, I think, for all of us is to find that perfect combination where you're taking care of yourself, but you're also being of service. It's very hard, I think, to do. Yeah.
Yes. And that brings me to a question I really wanted to ask you because you have such beautiful advice and tips and information resources for yoga teachers. And I often hear you say you really want to serve teachers, and a lot of the work you do is for teachers. So I've noticed for myself, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, is that it's a bit hard and challenging sometimes to show up and teach for others. Personally, I'm going through a sadness or grief or even like the day of election, I had to show up the next morning to teach for group classes, and that was really hard for me because I was dysregulated. So for it, whether it's a political climate or personal challenges that teachers might be going through that phase, that moment in their life, what are some advices for teachers to still they're scheduled to teach the next morning. Maybe they can't afford to take a mental time off from work. They still have to show up and teach the next day when you're, as a teacher, going through a challenging time. Any tips on how to navigate for yoga teachers?
Yeah, such a good question. I think there's a balance that we need to find as a yoga teacher where we're being honest with our students, but also not unloading on them. You know what I mean? Like they're coming to us for something, so we have to remember that we're there to serve them. But also it's okay to be human and to share a little bit about your challenges. I think when doing so, it's important that you do it as a personal thing. So like in the election, of course, you might have people that have different political views than you, but I think it's still okay to talk about it if you're claiming it in the first person. So you don't have to make overall comments like, I'm sure we're all upset about this election. Like, you don't have to say that, but you could say, I'm upset. Like, I'm still, I'm not feeling great. I was upset about the election. I have low energy today. Maybe we could do a quieter practice, and like bring it in. Or maybe you could even say, like, this is a practice that I would use when I'm not feeling great. I really like to go to this breathing practice or this asana supports me when I'm feeling sad. Maybe you'd like to try that with me today. I mean, to just be honest with people, but also to claim your own feelings and not necessarily project them onto the students. And I think that can be challenging because sometimes when you're in the role of teacher, it's almost like you feel like you have to make decisions for everybody, but you have to be careful you're not projecting onto them that they're sharing your feelings either. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, that's helpful. It is a challenging thing to navigate. So what you shared is super helpful. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. I just want to say I have a lot. I mean, I think that's just one. I could talk about it more. I'll just say, I mean, we can leave it there, but I'll just say that I think it's something that all teachers need to navigate personally.
Mhm.
And then it's like unavoidable. It's unavoidable that you're human, and it's okay. Like it's okay to not be perfect. And just because you're teaching yoga doesn't mean you have to be a perfected being who always knows the right thing to say or do. Like it's okay to mess up, but to me the answer is to always just like claim it. Like, to recognize your own humanity. And I have to say like students really like that usually. I mean, they usually really appreciate when you can be authentically yourself without dumping it on them. So I think that's the challenge. How can you be honest and be just another person? Like I'm a person, I have a life. Like I'm not feeling great today or something upsetting happened to me or I hurt my wrist yesterday or whatever it is. Like it's okay to share and then also be there for them. So like to find that balance is really anyway, I think it's a great point. Thanks for asking. I don't know.
No, that was great answer. Think, that would be really helpful for
Yeah.
people listening to hear, and it was helpful for me to hear that. I wanna go back a little bit and ask you a little bit about your career of 30 years as a yoga teacher. I know you said after 200, with the integral yoga, you also started working for integral yoga for quite some time. So I guess I'm curious, did you have another job or career before you became a teacher? Were you always balancing 2 different jobs or career path, or were you all in yoga from, um, back in the '90s? I'm curious about how yoga
Yeah.
has been able to support you to,
Yeah.
do what you love and also, like, make a living, or was it something you always have to have something else on the side to be able to
Yeah. I
survive?
usually had to have something else, unfortunately. I mean, I eventually figured out how to make a living, but it took me a long, long time. I think it can be very challenging in yoga to make a living as a full-time teacher, and I know that's the focus here, which is great. I mean, it just back then, especially, I just don't think and maybe it's not different now, I don't know, but there was just not enough interest in a sense, like, to even have full-time work. What I did is I, like, just put together a whole bunch of things. I had many careers. I used to be a reporter. I worked for an AIDS magazine, and so I would get to travel and write about AIDS, treatments and, what was happening in the AIDS world, which was really great. I mean, I learned a lot, and it was part of my activism. Also it gave me a great background in writing, which is why I enjoy writing books so much. I love writing. It's, something I got really great training in as a reporter because writing can be so hard. I also became a professional gardener, and so most of the time yeah, I know, it's funny. Most of the time I was teaching, I was also gardening, and that was really hard on my body. Like, gardening is, it's very intense physical labor. I injured my back pretty bad and also injured my back in a yoga class. So I've like had a lot of back injuries I was navigating through gardening and teaching. But then what happened at Integral Yoga is they eventually hired me to lead their 200 hours. So I actually became the teacher trainer and I led them. It was like just one after the other. I think I probably led like 40 200-hour trainings over a period of, almost 20 years. And that was incredible too, because I really got to study the process of training teachers and reflect on how it went and get really intimate with that and see the challenges of it. I think the 200-hour training system is good and bad. I think there's something really beautiful about it because I think it's a very quick and accessible format for learning to be a yoga teacher, but I think it's very limited too. And then it's just usually very brief. In fact, accessible yoga started because I realized that, the other thing I didn't say is I was also teaching in the community. So I would reach out to disabled folks. I was teaching in local hospitals for people with HIV and AIDS, and then I worked for the MS Society. Anyone who would take me, I would go and teach. But those students, my disabled students, wouldn't come and take my teacher training. I kept trying to get them. A lot of them had studied with me for years, and I said, "Oh, you'd be a great yoga teacher." And they were like, "What? I couldn't be a teacher," because they didn't see themselves as a yoga teacher. And the training itself was very intensive, and so they felt like they didn't have the energy or the time or the money to do it. And so accessible yoga started, it was in 2007. I started a 200-hour training that I designed specifically for disabled people to become yoga teachers. And we got a grant, which was amazing, to make it fit financially accessible. And we slowed it down, so it was over almost an entire year. And we had mentorship for the people, and it was in an accessible space. That was awesome. And we did that a few times. And then those students, many of them became teachers. Well, they all became teachers, and they helped me form Accessible Yoga as an organization over.
Oh, wow, amazing. I feel like I learned so much about you that I didn't know before. So
Yeah.
I'm curious about the grants. Did you have an experience trying to look for and apply for grants, and where were you able to find it? And also, was it like a partial, you were able to pay part of people's tuition, or was it, were you able to make it free for people? Like, how did you go about using that grant?
I mean, that grant in particular was really a gift. It happened through a bunch of yoga teachers, actually. It was Richard Rosen and Judith Lassiter, who both were on the board of an organization called the Yoga Dana Foundation, which is in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. It was a foundation that was started from money from Yoga Journal when Judith Lassiter, she was the founder of Yoga Journal, and then she sold it off and she took some of the money and put it into this foundation. So it's a very specialized program, and I was so lucky to meet them, and they were so kind, and they offered us a grant for the first couple of years, really helped make accessible yoga happen. And that paid, I think we gave full tuition to most of the students. I think a few of them paid a little bit. Like we offered a very reduced rate, like a couple $100 to students. And that was amazing because finances were definitely an issue, especially for disabled folks who are often on limited income to take the training. But the other piece is that my husband is actually a fundraiser. He spent his life working for nonprofits doing fundraising. And so he was always teaching me just through his experience about what fundraising is and how it works. And so I learned a lot from him over the years. And also, I want to say, in terms of my work, that he supported me a lot because he had like a 9 to 5 job. I mean, he didn't make a lot of money, but he had like a 9 to 5 salary, and I never did. And so I was able to kind of patch together different work, and he had enough to keep us eating and pay the rent. But I mean, I still have to say, like, a lot of big yoga teachers, I think, have that. Like, I see a lot of people who have, like, I don't know, their partner is like full-time supporting them or has money or something, and I feel like, I don't know, he and I we managed.
Mm.
We also adopted 2 kids, and so then because of my flexible schedule, I ended up being the stay-at-home dad, for the kids, which was challenging, and also meant I had to teach a little bit less because I could only teach
Mhm.
when they were in school, and then when he was home in the evenings and the weekends, I would just teach around their lives.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And although the podcast is called Full-Time Yoga Teacher, but I feel like a lot of people I do interview are not fully full-time, or they used to be full-time who have left and got a whole new career. So, and there's part-time teacher. I think it's, I wanna kinda show that
Yeah,
there's, so many different unique way, and, there's no one better way to be a teacher. But I wanna ask about, there's so much questions I wanna ask, but you were teaching, you said like almost 40 200-hour teacher training for the integral yoga, and that's also when you started teaching the accessible teacher training as well. Well, I guess I wanna hear the lessons you've learned from teaching so many teacher trainings. And what are some challenges or something that you have realized, like, "Oh, this is a problem," or maybe this needs to change, or maybe you have seen some common thread throughout all the teacher trainings, 200 that you have taught, that was some kind of beautiful common thread that you have seen. So what are some, like, I guess,
yeah,
lessons you learned from teaching so many teacher trainings?
yeah. Well, I think the main lesson I learned is that, um, teacher training, it's a great way to learn about yourself, and I think, and deepen your practice. And I think when people would come into the programs with that intention, it was more successful. Not everyone who takes a 200-hour training can become a full-time yoga teacher or make a living at yoga. It's so challenging. So I think there's a misunderstanding there that, just 200 hours of training is enough to get a full-time career or a successful career yoga. It might happen occasionally, but I think it's pretty rare. And I think So I think their focus on teaching itself is problematic because, there's so much benefit of just studying and immersing yourself in the teachings. And it's really the only place, I think, to do that. I mean, there might be a few others, but it's unusual to find an opportunity to get to dive into yoga philosophy and subtle practice in the ways that most yoga teacher training does. So I think there's a great benefit to it, just of the intense time and study. I just think it's not enough time to necessarily train someone to have a job in yoga. And I think it's just the beginning. It's the beginning of a teaching career. I mean, I think it's a great beginning just to get you in the room, just to get you, ready to give you something to teach. The thing that I think concerned me the most is that it was often the people who insecure about it who I thought would be the best teachers. Like I felt that, you know what I mean? Like the people who were just like hesitant or had imposter syndrome or felt like they weren't good enough or whatever. Usually they're the ones I was hoping would teach because I think usually they have like a special perspective on the world. Like they'd struggled, they had some life experience. Do you know what I mean? Like there's some weird like paradox there that it's like the people who don't see themselves as teachers usually end up being the best teachers. I don't know.
No, I can relate because I'm usually the very introverted one in the training or the groups. I'm usually the shy one.
Yeah.
And you openly talk about your shyness that you have to overcome. But like, I think, in the core, for example, like I'm always going to be an introvert person. It's really exhausting to try to be like, extrovert if that's not who I am. But I think that made me a better teacher because when I'm teaching a group training session, whether it's a weekend or the longer training, I'm very, very mindful of the quiet one in the room, and I'm trying to get the quiet ones to be able to also speak in
Hmm.
terms of not forcing them, but do a lot of small group, breaking up into smaller groups, and then meetings like group or big, and then coming back to bigger groups, which I think you do beautifully too. So that everybody has opportunity to share and speak. Because usually in the big groups, there's usually a handful of people who love to speak in front of a big group, and usually the shy ones kind of gets left behind, not left behind, but kind of are in the shadow, and they don't really get to share as much. And I always been that one, so I knew small breaking them up into small groups gave them opportunity to also share their thoughts and
Yeah.
experiences, which is so important. So I
Yeah.
do think it made me a better teacher in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I love shy people. I think there's so much for shy people to learn about themselves. And I love seeing, people coming out of their shells. And so I have a similar focus. I think, yeah, because of my intense shyness, like you said, I struggled with that my whole life. And teaching is what really brought me out, to be able to, because I care about yoga so much, I wanted to share it. It forced me to talk, to do public speaking and teach so much. So I feel really lucky that I had that opportunity.
Mm.
I think that that's what's so beautiful about yoga to me is that it can really shift the way you are in the world. Like if you allow yourself to go deep into practice, I think there's really an opportunity to learn about yourself and just start seeing yourself in a more objective way and to make choices so that we're not necessarily the victim of our past, but we can choose the direction that we want for our lives. And I think that kind of conscious awareness is at the heart of the yoga teachings and can offer so much to so many people who, just feel like we're stuck or we're the victim of our circumstances. And I think it's incredibly empowering to have choice.
Yeah, definitely. And I heard you recently share about how shyness, you were talking about your shyness and how that is also an ego and attachment to how you want to appear in front of others. And that was super fascinating for me to hear because I never heard anybody talk about shyness that way. So maybe would you like to elaborate a little bit for maybe listeners who haven't heard
Yeah.
of that yet before?
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, and I'm not a psychologist, but it's just based on my personal experience, I would say that shyness is an intense ego. It means an ego that's very focused on what other people think. And if there's like a sensitivity to others that shy people tend to have, that I think it can be debilitating. And so I think to let go of that, to let go of the need for people to approve, right? Like people pleasing too. I think people pleasing goes along with shyness sometimes. It's a very dangerous way to go and to live your life because you're not living for yourself, right? You're living to focus on what do other people think of me? How will they react? How will they respond? And I think it can be debilitating. And it was for me for many years. It still impacts me today. And I think it's kind of imposter syndrome we talk about, but I think it's more than that. I think those of us who are very shy, it can just feel, when I say shy, it's different than being introverted. Like, I think it's great to be introverted. I love to spend time alone. Like, that's energizing for me. But that's different than a shyness that's focused so much on worry about what are they saying about me? What do they think of me? What do they think do they think I'm smart? Do they think I'm attractive? Do they think I don't know. I just think that kind of worry it's something that gets worked out through teaching a lot, like, to be able to be in front of a group and just speak publicly and share, you have to let go of that self it's like it's a voice in your head that is so judgmental and self-critical that it's just, it can take away all of your strength. It can take away all of your power, and that's what I mean. It's like that's what ego is to me. Ego is this focus on external, right? The ego in the yoga sense is just the part of you that is obsessed with creating a false sense of individuality that doesn't even exist. I mean, according to yoga, like, we're spiritual beings, and the ego is this temporary understanding of, oh, I'm an individual person right now. But that's not even true in yoga, right? It's a limited false belief. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, thank you for sharing that. I think what's interesting is I think a lot of shy person, or I know you said it's different, but introverted person, do become yoga teachers. So I think what you shared is super helpful to hear.
yeah,
Okay, another question I have is recently on the podcast I listened to, your Accessible Yoga podcast, I love the end, like towards the end, you have a conversation outside of your interview. You have a conversation with your
yeah.
assistant, Diana. And I love that part because you share so much about philosophy. And I love listening to you talk about yoga philosophy.
Thank you.
But in there, I think kind of relates to what you just shared of we sometimes we care so much about how others see us or how we want to be liked. We want to be liked as a yoga teacher, right? You want your class people to like your class and want to come back to your class, and you want a fuller class. That's kind of an underlining, I think, pressure a lot of yoga teachers these days have. There's a lot of pressure to make sure your room is full or your class is waitlisted. And there's a lot of also comparison that can happen of like, well, that teacher's class is full or that teacher's popular. I've noticed a lot of almost too much fixation on what other people think about your class. You can read reviews about your classes on ClassPass or your studio, and it's so easy for teachers to get so fixated on like one bad negative review they received, or some people didn't like your playlist, or even though you're not teacher for everyone, not everybody gonna love your class, and that's okay. I guess fixation on external validation can be challenging these days. But you said something very interesting in that last conversation was that you said it's still important to listen to the feedback from your students and kind of really sit with it. Whereas sometimes I tend to like not want to read the reviews. I don't know if I want to read if people didn't like my class, if it was too slow, too fast, too quiet. So I don't know. Could you share a little bit about that, like feedback as a teachers and how important it can be, but also maybe I don't know, maybe needs to be a boundary with how you take in feedback because it can be challenging too.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I don't know what I said in that podcast, but I mean, now that you're asking me, I have to admit that I don't love reading feedback. I mean, I make myself do it because I think it'll improve my teaching, but I also recognize that at this point in my life, and it's taken me a long time to get here, that mostly people are seeing the world through their own mind and their own eyes, and that's their perception. And that doesn't mean I necessarily will have the same. And I think that's what yoga has shown me is like how much of a subjective perspective we have in the world, that each of us sees the world through whatever mood we're in, whatever concerns we have, whatever is distracting our mind, right? I mean, the basic yoga teaching is, right, we can go into philosophy a little bit and just say, like, Patanjali defines yoga as quieting the mind is yoga, so then we can experience the true self. And he focuses so much on the contents of your mind and how to actually well, first understand what is in your mind and then how to quiet it. And basically teaches meditation. I mean, really, yoga, according to Patanjali and what we call classical yoga, is a process of self-analysis and working with that through meditation, like working with quieting those thoughts through meditation. I think the more I study and practice and recognize my own tendencies, the way that my mind functions, how some days I'm feeling relaxed and good and the world seems slightly brighter. Some days I'm feeling upset or sad and the world seems darker. And recognizing that the way I see things is a product of my mind. Like that is a huge leap, I think, as a yoga practitioner to start to recognize your own personal biases. And that will allow you to see others. And it doesn't mean that I don't listen to other people, but I also know that they're just coming to it with their whatever's in their mind too. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. That's helped me a bit. It's such a great question though, because I think it gets back to this idea of ego. And I know we've talked about it quite a bit, which is interesting. So in the sutras, if we go to the sutra on egoism, Patanjali says that egoism is a false belief that, the false identification of the body mind with the power of spirit. So it literally defines asmita, egoism, as the false identification of, body mind as the source of everything, like as if your body mind is doing everything. And really, it's the spirit. And we are mistaking it with the body mind. And that's the ego. It's this false identification. So in a way, egoism is like a false, a case of mistaken identity. It's like the ego has taken over and said it's in charge, it's doing everything. But really, in the yoga teachings, no, it's spirit. Like spirit is acting through this limited body mind that's temporary. And that's going to die. Like I am only going to have this body and mind for the rest of this lifetime, however long that is. And so it's temporary, but my spirit, my true self is eternal and unchanging. And our job, according to classical yoga, is to start to differentiate those things, right? To differentiate which part of us is temporary and which part of us is permanent. And to shift identification. In fact, Patanjali, I talked about suffering briefly before. Patanjali explains that suffering arises when we conflate them, the temporary body mind with the spirit. And the way out of suffering is by having clarity of perspective, the wisdom to recognize which part of us is temporary, body, mind, and which part of us is eternal. Anyway, that's a long way of answering your question to say, I think that's where I go these days when I get feedback, is I try to remember that this is someone else's perspective based on where they're at and what's happening in them. And it's also a way for me to recognize my own limitations and my own attachments, you know, and attachments are those things that I think I need from outside of myself to be happy, rather than the recognition that happiness arises from connecting and realizing who I am. I know that was too much, but that's where I go. It's like the minute I hear criticism, it's like, okay, this is a chance for to remind myself of who I really am, right?
Thank you for sharing that. I love how you weave in philosophy and teachings of the sutras and also the
Yeah.
Gitas and all of that into how you respond and answer these questions. You
Yep.
know what you just shared reminded me of is when I took your accessible yoga teacher training in 2018, you did a demonstration with a glass jar. There was water in the jar, and then inside there was, I don't know what you use, like a crystal or something inside. The glass jar and the water is like your body, and then the crystal that was inside the water was your prusha, your like eternal self or your true self or spirit soul. And you use food coloring to drip it in the water, which is like the ego and attachment and aversions and fear and all these things, the kleshas that we develop over the years, and it clouds the water so we can no longer see the crystal anymore. And then you said like the practice of yoga and doing all the practices, not just asana, but like the pranayama or the niyamas and yamas, learning about the philosophy. and living your life in this kind of way, you start add water into the cup, and the color of the water that was so cloudy before gets lighter and clearer, and you can start to see the crystal again. And that has like really
Huh.
stuck with me so much. I don't know if you still do that
I do
demonstration.
occasionally, yeah, and that's from one of my teachers too, I have to say, Swami Kurunananda. It's a great
Okay.
demonstration, it's a great way to visualize.
Mhm.
You know why? Especially because, you know, the word attachment or non-attachment, actually, vairagya, means without color. And I think that's where she got the idea from, because it's idea of like your mind, you know, like we say, like you're seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, like your mind is colored or distorted from whatever is thoughts are in there, whatever your attachments are. And that's what yoga is trying to do is like remove that, you know, kind of it's the tendencies of the mind. So I think that's the other way I think about it is like the Gita talks about the likes and dislikes. That is like the mind has a tendency to cling to something that it likes, or and like you said, the kleshas, like that it's attached to, or avoid something that's painful. And so that's the constant dance that we're playing in life is through attachment and aversion. And yet eventually we realize that's all temporary. That's not who we really are. And I think that's what yoga is trying to teach us.
Yes, I love that visual demonstration you did. I do that sometime when I'm teaching
Okay.
a training, and I always say that this comes from my teacher,
Great. Yeah,
Jivana.
that's a good one. It's fun. It's also when you do it, it's fun to talk about emotion because I think that so often, and maybe it's like a theme in this conversation we haven't mentioned, just like the way that emotions, like difficult feedback or the fear of teaching and being in front of a classroom, like fear or criticism or disappointment, these powerful emotions really distort our mind and can just impact us in such a big way. And I think that in yoga, like we haven't quite figured out how to talk about emotions in terms of yoga philosophy, it seems to me. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like very intellectual, but I think emotion is really what is at the heart of these problems. Yeah, like our emotional reactions.
Yes, thank you for sharing that teachings because I feel like it's such a beautiful visual, and I love when you did that, and I love sharing it with my students too. So I
Mhm.
have a little bit of question maybe about your accessible yoga, like organizations that you built. I think it was a nonprofit organization. It is. You have been one of the pioneer leading. I know you had a lot of other people working with you to create that. So I'm curious about creating a nonprofit organization. What was that like? I'm not really sure. Is it still ongoing? Are you still part of? You are part of it, but maybe you're not. I'm just kind of curious what
Yeah.
the journey of that.
Yeah. Well, so I was, like I said, I was teaching accessible yoga training starting in 2007, and then actually in 2013, I moved to Southern California and had to kind of start over. And I had an experience here where I realized I didn't have a community. I didn't have like a really strong spiritual or yoga community like I'd had in the Bay Area, and I really missed that. And it occurred to me that other yoga teachers, especially accessible yoga teachers who are working outside of studios or, you know, like really community-based teachers, don't have any support. And I just feel like that was what I realized what I needed is something I also could share, right? Like I could create what I needed for myself. So I decided to create a conference. So we had an accessible yoga conference in person here in Santa Barbara in 2015. And then for a few years we had sometimes a few a year all over the world. And then out of those conferences we created a nonprofit. The nonprofit was basically that. It was built on the conferences and having ambassadors, and it was incredible. We made enough money just from the conferences to kind of run it and have staff, and we didn't have to do a lot of grant writing, but we had a few grants. But then when COVID happened, it really messed up the financial situation for the nonprofit. Because I was still teaching my training separately as through my own school, but it was the nonprofit was mostly for the conferences. We went online and it worked for a few years, but then the interest dwindled and we couldn't make enough money to support the nonprofit. And I was doing a lot of fundraising. It was just like taking all my time, and so we ended up closing it just about 2 years ago. which was really hard for me. It's hard to end something, but I also realized again, it's just my attachment. Like I just I needed to just let it evolve and focus on what was still working. And that was the teaching and what I love to do, writing and teaching and training yoga teachers. So I am very grateful to all the people that were involved. We had an amazing board, incredible staff. And I think we did a lot of great work. And accessible yoga continues now just as like my own, basically, it's like a training school and still try to offer service in the world. But a nonprofit yoga organization is very difficult. So if anyone's thinking about doing it, I just would caution you that I don't know if it's something you're thinking about, but I mean, it can be very hard to get consistent grants for yoga, for yoga nonprofits. You might get a few for a couple years, but it's very hard to have a long-term sustainable plan if you don't offer direct service. And one last thing I'll say is like for a while, I think I wanted to become like a bigger yoga organization, like something like Yoga Alliance, where we offered some kind of like real support for yoga teachers. But I noticed that all those organizations, like they all created standards and levels and all that. And I felt like I just couldn't do that. Like I didn't want an organization that was deciding what the rules were. That's not interesting to me. Like I want to support yoga practitioners and yoga teachers and spread the message, not limit it in any way. And so I think, I don't know. I would just say, I think it's a problem. I could talk about it. I mean, I won't go on too much more, but I'll just say, I think it's a problem that in the yoga world, the organizations that are successful are only the ones that make rules for us rather than the ones that are actually supporting us. And I've seen, especially through COVID, a lot of the smaller nonprofits like Accessible Yoga Association, which was a nonprofit arm. I've seen a lot of them close. And it's disheartening, It's very sad.
Okay, so that makes sense. So now you're continuing your yoga school, almost like a accessible yoga
Yes.
school. You're continuing to offer trainings and
Yes.
teachings and places for people to meet, but the nonprofit side of it is no longer there.
Right. And we've turned our ambassador program into a mentorship program. So we also have an ongoing accessible yoga mentorship program, which is exciting. And I'm getting more involved in that. So we offer, like, I don't know if you know Rodrigo Salza, but he and I will each do sessions each month working with accessible yoga teachers all over the world. It's really beautiful. And I lead trainings. I do a few in person each year, and then I do a lot online, like the accessible yoga training. And then we do some series where I bring in like a workshop series, like 10 sessions on a topic with different presenters.
Yeah, definitely. I get all of your newsletters, so I see all the amazing trainings that you're doing. And for listeners, I feel like what you offer is so valuable, but you're so generous with a lot of the pricing point is sliding scale. You offer scholarships, and also a lot of time lately, you're offering the first session of those series for free for anybody to join. So I feel like you offer so much for teachers.
Thanks. I think financial accessibility is huge. And I know a lot of yoga teachers and yoga practitioners struggle, to pay for trainings and any ongoing education. And yet I think we need it. All of us need to continue to practice ourselves. In fact, I would say my main message for yoga teachers is to find your practice. And I don't mean to say it in a critical way, because I feel like sometimes you have this very critical message that like you have to practice everything you're teaching. I'm not saying that, but I think like find and build a personal practice that is actually supportive of you as an individual for your own spiritual growth. And I think that is what will inspire your teaching most, to have a personal spiritual practice that really comforts you and gives you strength so that you have the energy and enthusiasm to continue to serve others. That's the balance of like self-care and service.
I feel like I can relate with I remember a lot of the trainings I wanted to continue education trainings I was interested in when I was a newer teacher was so expensive. It was like thousands of dollars and with because I have been full-time since I started, but obviously I wasn't making a lot of money as a full-time teacher, especially in the beginning trying to teach 30 classes a week. So I felt like there's no way yoga teachers can actually afford this training cost. But I think a lot of people had another career or help. That's why they were able to. So I always appreciate it when teachers offered scholarship, work trade grants, or partial scholarship. I think those are so important because it has helped me so much to be able to get
Oh,
the
yeah.
education.
Yeah, it's very important for accessibility. I think it's really key. And I love teaching, and so that's also why I do like a podcast, like it's a free offering so people can, like you said, listen to my podcast and get access to really everything I share. Also, even on social media, for me, social media is another teaching platform. Basically I'm a teacher. So for me, I use every platform I can to teach and to spread the teachings of yoga. So Instagram, I share all the time, tons of stuff on Facebook. In you know in my books also, that's another platform that's relatively inexpensive. Like, you could read my books and basically get everything that I'm teaching. You know what I mean? You don't have to come to a training. In fact, my latest book, the third one, The Teacher's Guide to Accessible Yoga, I basically tried to consolidate a lot of the teachings I share in my, accessible yoga training, which is usually 40 or 50 hours long and could be expensive for people. So you could just read the book.
Yes, I love this one that you're talking
Yeah.
about. So many great information on there. I want to talk a little bit about you becoming a dad, and you said you were kind of like primary caretaker for your kids because your husband was working most full time. So I want to hear how was it? You share a little bit in the book, but raising your two kids, but also teaching and trying to balance. And you said you had to scale back your teaching when you were raising your kids. So like how are you finding the balance of being a dad for your kids and also still being a yoga teacher?
Yeah, it's really a huge part of my life. I mean, parenting is like the biggest practice of yoga, I think, for anyone who is a parent. Well, my kids are older now. They're adults. They're 20 and 24, and they both have moved out, which is great. It was during those early years, the young years, when I really had to scale back and focus on caring for them. When I look back now, I see that it was actually like an intensive time of practice for me, of like being with my own mind and learning how to be of service for real. Because I think what's great about parenting is the love, or I could say for myself, the love I had of my children, I was there for them. Like, I would serve them without thought. And I think that's really what karma yoga or service is about. And so parenting definitely taught me how to be a yoga practitioner, I think, in a way that I had never realized before. But also, once they got old enough, I was out the door. Like, I was dying to teach more. And so, like, literally, like, when they were in after school activities, once my son hit middle school, I was just like gone. And I started traveling. I got invited to teach internationally. And my poor husband, like, he was working a full-time job, but I was just like, I'm going to go. And so I just started traveling. I was almost traveling full time at that point. I would be gone at least, I don't know, 2 weeks out of each month, traveling and teaching. And so I did like the early caregiving years, but then I was like out, gone teaching, and he was stuck with doing everything. Once they were old enough, like when they were old enough to like basically take care of themselves, I was still there, but only as much as I could, and still do the things I really wanted, which was traveling and teaching was like my dream come true. Like, that was really incredible. And so I got to teach, but it was so funny. It's like financially, I could only travel when I was going and invited somewhere. So I didn't really get to choose where I got to travel. I would just go where someone would invite me. But I got to travel and teach in Europe every year. And a lot around the US and Canada, and then some in Mexico, South America. But it was just so eye-opening to work with yoga teachers all over the world and get to spend time with them. And that was like before COVID. you know, yeah, like I was traveling probably, I don't even know. And what I did before COVID is I had trained other people to lead the accessible yoga training. So I had basically 10 other teachers who were traveling too. We do over 40 trainings a year all over the world. But then with COVID, we went online, which was amazing. So we could reach so many people without having to physically go. And then just in the last few years, I'm back to doing both, which I love. I really like both. I love teaching online and I love teaching in person. So I feel like now it's kind of the best of both worlds, honestly.
Mhm. And I know you also recently did a triathlon.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And you're a long distance runner, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm a runner myself too, and recently kind of got more into it. And so I'm curious from like somebody who's also a yoga practitioner and teacher, and you train for triathlon, how well, how do you think those two can complement one another and balance each other? And also, what you said of you're starting to travel again for teaching, how do you balance it all?
Yeah. Well, actually, it's directly related because it was when I stopped, like COVID made me stop traveling. And that was good for me personally, for my body, because I got to exercise in a more conscious way. So it's exactly true. When I was traveling so much, I couldn't take care of myself in the same way. Like I wasn't always sleeping well. I was like flying all over. I was eating badly. I couldn't exercise. I got to do my yoga practice, but all of a sudden, when it all stopped for COVID, I had like hours to do that. And it was really incredible. And that's what got me to do a triathlon for sure, is that I started to spend, yeah, I still do spend at least 2 to 3 hours, I'd say, like a day doing different kinds of exercise. Like, this morning I already did a long bike ride and went for a long walk. And usually I do a run too. And then I do weights and I do yoga. So it's just been amazing to have the time of that online teaching has given me, honestly, and my kids moving out, to be able to have the time to do that every day. And that's a real luxury that I don't take for granted. Like, it's only been the last few years that, like, the stars aligned, and I'm able to do that. And so the triathlon was the result of that, just having the time. But I'm older, so I feel kind of sad. Like, I don't, I'm 58, so the triathlon was kind of pushing me. I don't like, I don't know how to say it, but with intense sports, I think we have to be careful in older bodies. Like, I just don't want to hurt myself. And so, I mean, I get small injuries all the time, and yoga helps me with that. But I just have to like keep my mind in check. So I'd say the main way that yoga helped me with my triathlon and my exercise is just working with my mind, and that I definitely was able to overcome limits that I had for myself because of my yoga practice. So I never thought of myself as an athlete ever. Like, I never did any sports. Like, I was never interested in that. And my asana practice was always very gentle. I had been a gardener, but I didn't really do anything like that. I never really liked running or biking, and then it just all changed. And I decided, like, I think what yoga has done for me is made my mind just more flexible so that I could try things and be open to them and really like welcome them in a way that I just never expected. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love to see other yoga practitioners and teachers who's also are doing running or triathlon, swimming or lifting weights. I think it's because I love to do all of that myself. And for me, I love yoga and I also love lifting weights or running. And I want my yoga to be my yoga practice. And I want the other things to challenge me in a different way that yoga doesn't challenge me. So I love seeing other teachers or, other practitioners who's also embracing that and even sharing more about it. So which I love.
And also, I think running in particular, I have to say, running and biking for me. I mean, swimming I still struggle with, honestly, even though I did the triathlon. But I would say running and biking for me are so meditative. Like, that's the beautiful thing. Like, the repetitive physical movement is very calming to my nervous system in a weird way, and also to my mind. So even though like physically they're challenging, they do something to my mental state that I think is really great. It's almost, I always say to all my students, like, we all meditate naturally. Like, we find that in our lives, and then yoga just does it consciously. Like, yoga is designed to cultivate a flow state. It happens to us in other times during the day. Like, the things you love to do are probably creating that for you. And I find that happens a lot with biking, especially for me, and running. It's like when there's no time and no space, right? Like, to me, those are the qualities of being in a meditative flow. I never expected to find that in running or biking or anything.
Uh, Yes, I totally agree. And I think what I really enjoy about running for me is that it gets me outside more, like, and I get to be by the water because I also live near the ocean in Long Beach or in the trails in the mountains. Whereas sometimes yoga practice, a lot of time I do it indoor. And if I'm reading a book of, Yoga Sutra, it's usually indoor, whereas like that takes me outside into nature, which has been something that's very beautiful and I really appreciate.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, I have one final question for
Okay.
you. I know you have been doing a podcast where you're celebrating your 30th year of teaching and you've been interviewing other teachers. So I want to ask you the question you ask other teachers. So, what have you learned in the 30 years of teaching? And also, what keeps you going? What inspires you to continue after 30 years? Because I'm in my about 10 years of teaching. And when I see other teachers who's been teaching 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that is something, it's very inspiring for me to see that. And it's important for me to see somebody who have walked the path already and who still continue to walk the path of yoga and also teaching yoga. So what inspires you and what are something you learned in that 30
My
years?
God, that is hard. I mean, really, that I wrote a whole book about it, honestly. Like, the teacher's guide is like what I learned about teaching yoga, but I could just say, I think teaching yoga is like a way for me to love people. And like, honestly, it sounds corny, but it's like, I really feel like I can connect with people in a way that I can't in day-to-day life. Other than my husband or close friends or family, like there's just a intimacy and almost like, I don't know, a shared experience that I find in teaching that I don't find anywhere else. Even when I'm a student, I don't feel it as much as when I'm the teacher. When I teach, it gets me so focused and aware because I'm there to serve. So that brings all my energy, all my attention, that it intensifies that experience for me of connection that has just changed my life. And I think it's the most beautiful thing and also the most intense experience to like feel that connection to people who I often don't even know, like could be total strangers. And so that has been transformational for me. And also the other thing it's done, I think, is allow me to transcend some of my ego limitations about who who are my people. Like the tendency I think that maybe we all have, but I have, of like only liking some people and not liking other people. And like really trying to be open to anyone, like anyone who comes to the class, anyone who comes to my Zoom session or walks in the door of a in-person session, that we can connect and we have something to share. And I think that's really, really beautiful to experience that kind of more global, you know, connection with people. Anyway, I don't know. What was the other part? Was there another part to the question?
Other part was what inspires you to
I mean,
continue?
that also inspires me, is just that feeling. I mean, what an amazing feeling it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I taught a class the other day and I just felt like so touched that I was able to practice with people and share these teachings, and that there's something that happens in the teaching of it that makes it more powerful for me. And I don't even know if I could verbalize it, like what that is, that I could practice, I could do my meditation by myself, but when I'm teaching it, it feels different. There's just something more intense, and there's an intensity there that I think to me it comes back to service that touches me on a deeper level. I think to be of service is to really enjoy it, like to enjoy life. There's really, like, when I think back to my life, and I mean, there's special moments, but so many of my fondest memories are just like connecting with others through teaching. Like, honestly, it's just been such an incredible honor. I feel so grateful to I think about all the people who kept these teachings alive for literally thousands and thousands of years, and just how blessed I am to have access to them. And so I also feel a certain like sense of responsibility, like or even like a burden that I have to give back. You know what I mean? Like I have to give back what I've gotten, because the yoga teachings have given me a lot of peace of mind. And I don't think I could rest if I wasn't actively sharing those back. And then one other little piece, I don't know how to say this one, but there is like a creative part of teaching and writing and podcasting, all those things that really inspires me. I think that I'm kind of in my heart, I think I'm an artist, actually. I mean, that's how I trained. I didn't talk about any of that, but I used to be an artist. And I think what art is to me is like expressing spirit through something, like letting spirit move through me in a creative way. And so I think creativity, to me, that the real fun of teaching is to be able to create a new class each time. Even though it's like almost the same, it's like slightly different. You know what I mean? And like or to write about something, a teaching or an idea, and to make it kind of the same but slightly different. And even just talking to you, I've really enjoyed that. Hopefully, it's been useful, but I think there's a creative process in expression, especially around spirituality, that I really love.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And it's been so fun for me to be able to interview different yoga teachers from all over the world. And I love to find like common threads and patterns in all of these conversations I have with yoga teachers. And I think one of the common thread that I hear over and over is a lot of teachers I get to interview say something similar in terms of like teaching is a form of art for them. You know, this is how they practice creativity and this is the art that they are expressing. So I love what you said. And then I have before we even to say the one last thing, I have a request for you, maybe in your possible ideas for your future offering. I love the way you teach yoga philosophy, especially Yoga Sutras, but I mean everything, even the Gitas, and I know you do Hatha Yoga Pratipika too. And it's for me, it's very rare to find teachers that really resonate the way you share the teachings in a way that's very easy to understand, practical, and very applicable to our life in day to day. And I know that's not common to find for me to find teachers who teach and share yoga teaching in that way. So I feel like you should offer something where it's like a sutra study group where you go through each sutra one by one each week or every couple of weeks. It could be like, I don't know, ongoing monthly thing, or I don't know how long it'll take. But
Yeah.
I would love to study each sutra by sutra with you, even like first two chapters. So
Yeah.
that's my
Yeah, no, I would love to. I've done that in the past, but I would love to do it again, and I would do that all the time if I could, but it's funny, like, not as many people are interested as you think. Like, I don't know how many people are interested in yoga philosophy. When I teach philosophy classes, usually they're smaller than any asana-related thing. Everyone still wants asana. But I would say it's too bad because, like you're saying, that's the best. I mean, there's so much there. I keep trying to find different ways to do it. So, like, I just taught about the 8 limbs of yoga. That was basically philosophy. And in the Accessible Yoga Mentorship Program, I'll be doing a lot of that. And also, my new book that I'm working on is Yoga Meditation. And it's basically looking at meditation through through yoga philosophy and the yoga practices. And so there's a lot of that in there. And I'll be teaching a course on that eventually next year. But I'll keep it in mind. I mean, I'd love to have time with you and to be able to share more about yoga philosophy. It's definitely my favorite thing. So,
Yes.
thank
Yeah, I
thank
love when you share on your podcast or even in your courses. And yeah, I can kind of see why more people might be interested in the movement and asana part. But you might get a very, like, it may not be a huge group, but you might get a group of really fascinated and a group of students who are really want to go deep with you if you offer
yeah.
something like that.
Okay, I'll think about it.
Yeah, I would love for you to do it. You know, that whenever you have time in your schedule
Yeah.
too. But I
Well,
would love something like that from you because it's not, like I said, it's not common for me to find a teacher who I really resonate the way you teach yoga philosophy. So I really appreciate all the teachings you put out there.
okay.
So thank
Thank
you so
you.
much for your
Thank you so
time,
much.
Jivana. Please
Yeah.
let the listeners know what's coming up for you, how they can reach you. Is there any
Um,
special new courses or any weekly things you offer? Anything you want to share with the listeners?
let's see. I have a new course. It's called The Art of Teaching Chair Yoga. So it's kind of like a follow-up on my basic chair yoga course and my accessible yoga training. I also have, of course, the accessible yoga training online. The art of teaching chair yoga I'm excited about. It's for yoga teachers to kind of, really go deeper in there and really reflecting on how they teach, honestly. And then there's the new book. I'll be traveling to Australia in at the end of April, so that's exciting. I have a few dates there, and yeah, I don't know. That's about it. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's nice to see you again and talk to you, and I really appreciate your encouragement and your very kind feedback. Actually, it's nice to get nice feedback. So thank you. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you for coming on to chat with me. I feel like so grateful that I got to have this like quality one-on-one conversation with you. That's something I don't take lightly. So I really appreciate your time. And you have really made a huge influence and impact in my teaching life and my teaching path. And I'm sure I will continue to be in your circle and listening and learning from you. So thank you so much for all that you do for the yoga world and also for yoga teachers. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. All right. See you later.
Thank you so much for listening to the conversation I had with Jivana. I hope you got so many beautiful teachings out of that conversation. He weaves in teachings to every questions that I asked him, how he answered. He weaves in beautiful teachings to it, and he does that with so much care and love and service, like he said. So such an amazing teacher that I would love for you to go follow his podcast, his Instagram, subscribe to his newsletter so you can get his writings every week, get his books. There's so many different ways that you can learn from him. So thank you, Jivana, so much. It was such a great yoga book club we had with one of his book, Yoga Revolution. So I'd really recommend that book to everybody, but all of his books are amazing. So you have inspired me to become accessible yoga teacher in my community of yoga studios nearby that I get to work for. I hope I can have even fraction of an influence you have had on me in terms of spreading accessible yoga. So thank you, Jivana, for coming on and sharing your wisdom, sharing your teachings with us. To wrap up this week's episode, I want to say I hope everybody is having a great beginning of the new year's. Only announcement I have is go check out my yoga retreat that's coming up in end of July of this year. It's at northern part of Nicaragua, right by beautiful beaches. Beaches are almost like private beach because there's not many people there, and you get to just walk out onto this beautiful beach every day from your room very easily. The yoga shala has this view. It's open air yoga shala, has a view of the ocean. You can hear the waves crashing as you practice yoga. There's just so much beauty in that area for you to feel, experience. And there's also giving back aspect to this retreat, kind of like what Jivana was talking about with service. I wanted the service to be part of this retreat, not just us going into another country, enjoying the beauty and leaving. I wanted some part of giving back. That is why part of the money you pay for the retreat will be directly donated to the grassroots nonprofit organizations that's working in the community that we'll be visiting. We will do a volunteer work at an after-school program in that community. And one of the art workshop, will be facilitated and led by the women empowerment organization in that area. So you'll get to learn from the women there, learn how to make this beautiful art craft made with local natural supplies from the area. I hope you can join. If you have any questions about that, you can always let me know. You can find me on Instagram at Reika Yoga, ReikaYoga, or you can message me on my website, www.reikayoga.com. If you enjoy this podcast, please rate, review, subscribe, star, anything you can do on whatever platform you're listening to. And most importantly, share this podcast with somebody you think will also enjoy this podcast. Maybe your yoga teacher friends, maybe your yoga friend, maybe your yoga teachers. So share this podcast to a friend. You can also share on social media and tag me if you like. And like I always say at the end, thank you so much for listening. It means a lot to me. And I will speak to you soon. Have a great day.